Good day everyone! Today, we will discuss all about prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell, its part and function, as well as the structure and essentiality to all living organisms. So here is our objectives. First, identify each part of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. Number 2, create a graphic organizer showing the similarities and differences of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell based on its characteristic and structure. And the last one, realize the importance of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell to all life on Earth. But before we proceed to our proper discussion, let us start with a simple motivation through group activity entitled, Can You Identify Me? So class, this is what you're gonna do. You will be divided into 8 groups. After that, select your leader, your beadle, as well as your group name. Then, each group should need to identify the pictures presented on the screen, and your answer should be written clearly in your 1/4 illustration board. Take note, you have only 15 seconds to think and finalize your answer. When you hear the buzzer sound, that was the time that you will raise your answer by your group mate. The group who got the highest point is declared as a winner. Good luck and have fun, everyone. So here's the direction. Identify whether the pictures presented is belong to prokaryotic or eukaryotic cell. Are you ready now? If yes, let's start. Number 1 is euglena. You have 15 seconds to identify this picture. Time's up. The final answer is prokaryotic cell. Next one is the dolphin. 15 seconds timer is start now. Reminder, you have only 9 seconds to answer. Time's up. The answer is eukaryotic cell. The third one is chimpanzee. The timer start now. You have only remaining 7 seconds to answer. Time's up. The answer is eukaryotic cell. Next one is E. coli. Start now. Reminder, you have only 5 seconds to answer the question. Time's up. The answer is prokaryotic cell. Another one is Colphidium cellular. Take note, class, you have only 6 seconds to answer. Time's up. The answer is prokaryotic cell. Next one, we have penguin. The timer start now. Time's up. The answer is eukaryotic cell. We have also fungi. Are you ready? If yes, now we will start. You have remaining 5 seconds to answer. Time's up. The answer is eukaryotic cell. Another one is Vorticella. The timer starts now. You can do it, class. Time's up. The answer is prokaryotic cell. And the last one, we have sunflower. The timer starts now. Take note, class, you have only 7 seconds to answer. Time's up. The final answer is eukaryotic cell. How do you define the activity? Is it fun? Now, let us further explore by doing this activity. Can you find my parts? So, this is the direction. Label the parts of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell and answer the question provided. So this is the diagram for prokaryotic cell that you need to be identified, as well as the diagram for eukaryotic cell. Here is also the guided questions that you need to be answered. What do you think is bigger, prokaryotic or eukaryotic cell, and why? At this moment, you may now start. Are you done? If yes, let us find out the answer for that activity. But before that, bear in your mind that the prokaryotic cell is a unicellular organism that lacks of organelles or other internal membrane-bound structure, and most of these organisms found within the domain bacteria and archaea. So basically, they do not have a nucleus, but instead they have a single chromosomes that are located in an area of the cell called nucleoid. It is also considered as one of the earliest and most primitive form of life on Earth, as well as they can be found almost anywhere. Therefore, prokaryotes is perhaps can live in your skin, in your body, and even in everyday objects in your environment. So regarding with the diagram of prokaryotic cell, the first part of it is called plasma membranes that surrounds the cell cytoplasm and regulate the flow of substances in and out of the cell. So this part is the very important because it contains of proteins and lipid, particularly the phospholipid. However, the type and the number is depend on the species. Additionally, it is also the main site for metabolic processes such as respiration, photosynthesis, and fermentation. Next is the cell wall. It is described as the outer covering that protects the bacterial cell and also provides shape. So cell wall is very necessary for prokaryote since it provides strength and rigidity to the cell as well as the ability to withstand osmotic changes or from bursting. However, the chemical composition of the cell wall varies between the archaea and bacteria. Just like on the bacterial cell, wherein the cell wall is mainly composed of peptidoglycan, on the other hand, cell wall also play a vital role for the initial cell division. So in this section, it is called as the capsule, wherein it is the additional outer covering that protects the cell when it is engulfed by the other organism. So class, take note that capsule is also assist to the retaining moisture by binding the significant amount of water, making the cells resistant to drying. It is also help the cell adhere to surface and nutrients and serve as the bridge for attainment or rather attachment and repulsion of cell from the other microorganism. Another major feature of prokaryote is flagellum that described as a long and whip-like protrusion that aid in cellular locomotion. Take note that the flagellum has the most critical role since it is responsible for the movement of the cell. as well as it has a sensory functions that allow them to sense changes in their surrounding that enable the cell to respond appropriately. Next one is the nucleoid that contains all or most of the genetic material. Another one is ribosomes, which is responsible for protein productions. In the other word, ribosome is a protein builder that are commonly found in the cytosol. That has a primary function is to synthesize protein by translating messenger RNA. And the last part is phyllos, that described as a hair-like structure on the surface of the cell that attach to other bacterial cell. So this means that phyllos is also have a role in movement, but they are more often involved in adherence to surface, which facilitate infection and is also responsible for conjugation. Furthermore, let us now proceed to eukaryotic cell. Remember, the eukaryotic cell, it is a larger and complex type of cell that contains true nucleus, membrane-bound organelle, and rod-shaped chromosome. So probably, eukaryotic cell is considered to be a multicellular since it contains a variety of structures called organelle which perform a various functions within the cell. Mostly organisms that are belong to eukaryote are protozoa, fungi, plant, and animal. The eukaryotic cell has a part. First is the nucleus, which is responsible for the repository for genetic information. Class, take note that the nucleus is one of the major part of the cell, especially that it is known as the brain of the cell that provide commands for the proper functioning of the other cell organelles, as well as responsible for carrying a genetic information in a form of DNA or RNA. The second one is the nucleolus, that is responsible for RNA synthesis, which is the mainly involved in the production of ribosomal subunit. It is found inside the nucleus of the eukaryotic cell, and it is also surrounded by a membrane that takes up 25% of the volume of the nucleus that contains DNA, RNA, and protein. Up next is the RAF-ER, which is the starting point of the biosynthetic pathway of protein, carbohydrate chain, and phospholipid. Additionally, RAF-ER is made up of membranes which have a ribosome attached on it. That's why, as you observe it, it has a wrap appearance, contrary to the smooth ER. Another one is the smooth ER, which is described as the lack of ribosome and has a function during lipid synthesis. Compared to the RAP-ER that synthesizes protein, carbohydrates, and phospholipid, smooth ER is responsible for the production of steroid hormones, lipid, and detoxification of harmful metabolic products, as well as the storage and metabolism of calcium ion within the cell. This section also shows the plasma membrane that serves as the mechanical cell boundary which mediates cell-to-cell interaction and selectively permeable barrier. Just like with the prokaryotic cell, plasma membrane is also control the passage of organic materials such as ion, water, and oxygen into and out of the cell, as well as the waste such as the carbon dioxide is also leave by passing through plasma membrane. Next one is we have ribosome that is responsible for protein synthesis just like the prokaryotic cell. And next one is the lysosome that is used for intracellular digestion. Perhaps lysosomes is sometimes called the garbage disposal because it aids the breakdown of polysaccharide, nucleic acid, and even worn out organelles. We have also Golgi body that is responsible for packing and secretion of materials for various purposes. Remember, Golgi body is one of the important parts of eukaryote since its job is to process and bundle macromolecules like proteins and lipid as they synthesize within the cell. sometimes it is compared to a post office inside the cell because it modifies, sort, and package protein to be secreted. Additionally, we have peroxisome that are involved in the production and elimination of hydrogen peroxide during biochemical processes. In other words, peroxisome, also described as a small, round organelles that are enclosed by a single membrane. These organelles are breakdowns the fatty acid and amino acid as well as help to detoxify many toxic that may enter the body. We have mitochondria that is known as the powerhouse of the cell, or it is sometimes called as the energy factories because they are the primary site of metabolic respiration, and also it is somewhat like a batteries in a sense that it converts energy from one form to another, such as food nutrients to ATP. On the other hand, we have also cytoskeleton that provides cell structures and movement. That's why it plays the most important function of the eukaryotes. Likewise, it also secures some organelle in their specific position, responsible for endocytosis and cell division. And lastly, we have cytosol, which is the liquid matrix found inside the cell. Cytosol contain water, small molecules, and proteins that serve several functions and a site of the most of the metabolic processes. At this moment, let us elaborate by doing this activity, compare and contrast. This is the direction. Fill out the Venn diagram, cite the similarities and differences of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell according to its feature and characteristic. This is the diagram that you should fill up. With this activity, what do you find out? We obtain that the prokaryotic and eukaryotic differences is first, prokaryotic has a nucleoid while eukaryotic has a nucleus. It has a simpler DNA in prokaryotic while eukaryotic have a complex DNA. Prokaryotic no membrane-bound organelle while eukaryotic has a membrane-bound organelle. Typically much smaller, the prokaryotic, while eukaryotic is typically much larger. Prokaryotic is unicellular, while eukaryotic is multicellular. Both of these cells has a chromosome, ribosome, cytoplasm, and vacuole. Based on the diagram, can you consider the virus as prokaryotic or eukaryotic cell? Why? Here is the answer. Viruses are considered neither prokaryote nor eukaryote because they lack of characteristic of living things except the ability to replicate. Can you give an example of organism found in your environment do you think belong to eukaryote? So here is the example. Eggplant, orchids, and sampaguita are fall under the category of plants. For animals, we have ants, cat, and dog. It is considered all types of fungi. To determine your understanding in this lesson, let us have an evaluation. Take note that this assessment consists of 3 parts, namely identification, graphic organizer, and an essay. Are you ready? So now, let's start for part 1, identification. Number 1, it is a type of cell that is considered as unicellular and lack of organelles. Number 2, it is a part of eukaryote that serves as the outer covering that protects the bacterial cell and it gives it shape. Number 3, long and whip-like protrusion that aid in cellular locomotion. Number 4, a larger and complex cell that described for having a rod-shaped chromosome. And lastly, for part 1, responsible for protein synthesis. Now, let us proceed for part 2, graphic organizer. Here is the direction, class. You must need to complete the diagram based on what is the required information needed. Your answer must need to write in a blank box provided. And now for an essay. Here is the question. What do you think is the importance of prokaryote and eukaryote to all life on Earth? Are you done? If yes, here is the answer key. Okay, number 1, prokaryotic cell. Number 2, cell wall. Number 3, flagella. Number 4, eukaryotic cell. And number 5, ribosome. For part 2, here is the answer. So the missing part is, first, for prokaryotic, it has a nucleoid, while eukaryotic, it has nucleus. So prokaryotic is unicellular and eukaryotic is multicellular. Both of them have vacuole. So class, it is not only limited for vacuole, so you can also check those parts, which is the similarities of both prokaryotic and eukaryotics, on the diagrams that we showed earlier. And now, for the answer in essay, prokaryote plays a critical role in the recycling of nutrients by decomposing dead organisms and allowing their nutrients to be used, while eukaryote is important to balance biodiversity and food chain. You can also check, class, those paper of your classmates regarding with the essays, those words or keywords that are mentioned here. Are we clear now? If yes, that's end our session. Thank you for listening.